He's standing in his kitchen, 58 years old, holding a piece of paper. It's the deed to his house. Paid off, no mortgage. Not a single dollar owed to the bank. He's smiling. Because this is the moment he planned for his entire adult life. Then he opens the mail. Property tax bill. Homeowner's insurance renewal. Utility adjustments. HOA. The smile doesn't last long. And here's what gets me every time I see this happen. The house didn't change. His name is still on the deed. But the money in his bank account is still disappearing. Every single month. Without a mortgage payment. When I bought my first home, I had the same belief most people in their 30s carry around like a badge. Pay off the house and you're free. That's the finish line. I genuinely thought once the mortgage was gone, the house stopped costing me anything real. Turns out, I had just graduated to a more expensive game with different rules, and no one hands you the rule book. That belief, pay off the house and you're set, is one of the most deeply held assumptions in Gen X financial planning. And for decades, it held up okay. But the cost structure of homeownership in 2026 is not what it was in 1995, or 2005, or even 2015. The numbers have shifted in ways that make the old formula quietly dangerous. So today, we're going to walk through what I call the hidden 80% cost. The chunk of retirement that gets eaten up by expenses most people never run a real number on until it's too late. Why would someone with zero debt be at risk of running out of money by 80? That's exactly what we're going to unpack. And if you're already wrestling with the retirement spending math, and you're not sure your current plan actually holds up under real conditions, hit subscribe. That's what this channel is built for. Let's start with a number that looks reassuring. According to the Federal Reserve's most recent data, the median net worth for Americans between 55 and 64 sits at around $364,500. If you're in that range or above it, you might look at that figure and think, okay, I'm not in bad shape. But here's the problem with that number. It's not lying to you. It's just not telling you the whole story. More than half of that $364,500 is locked inside your home equity. It's not in a brokerage account. It's not in a savings account. It's not somewhere you can wire $3,000 from on a Tuesday afternoon when the furnace dies. It's in the walls. Strip out the home equity and what most households in this age group actually have in liquid, accessible assets, money they can spend without selling the house, lands somewhere between $150,000 and $180,000. That's the real number, not $364,500. Closer to $165,000. I've watched people sit with that gap for the first time and go completely quiet. Because it's not that they made bad decisions. It's that the way most of us learned to measure financial health was never designed to separate what you own from what you can actually use. Net worth is an accounting term. It tells you what you'd have left if you sold everything and paid off everything on the same day. That day almost never comes. What retirement actually runs on is cash flow and liquidity. Those are different measurements entirely. This is what the financial industry calls being house rich, cash poor. And it's not a fringe situation. It's the default condition for a significant portion of people entering retirement right now. Think about what $165,000 actually means in practice. If you need $1,500 a month from savings to cover the gap between your income and your expenses, that pool runs dry in about 9 years. If you need $2,000 a month, you're looking at roughly 7 years. And that's before we factor in any kind of health event, home repair, or inflation pressure on your day-to-day costs. The assets are real. The equity is real. But equity doesn't pay your electric bill. It doesn't cover a root canal. It doesn't write a check to your insurance company in October. Holding most of your wealth in an illiquid asset while relying on a thin layer of cash to fund 20 or 30 years of retirement is a structural fragility. It doesn't mean disaster is guaranteed. It means your margin for error is much smaller than your net worth statement suggests. And when the next inflation spike hits, or the next market correction, or just an ordinary bad year with 2 or 3 unexpected expenses, that margin is the first thing that disappears. So, with roughly $180,000 in real liquid savings and a paid-off home, how long can a retired household actually stay solvent? Let's run the actual numbers. Picture the same guy from the beginning of this video. He's 65 now. Last day of work was a Friday. That weekend, there was champagne, a dinner out. His wife told him he looked lighter than he had in years. Monday morning, the first Social Security deposit lands in his checking account. As of early 2026, the average monthly Social Security benefit for a retired worker is around $2,076. For a couple where both spouses qualify, that combined figure lands closer to $4,000 a month. $4,000 a month sounds like a real income, and it is, until you sit down with the actual bills. According to Bureau of Labor Statistics data, the average retired household in America spends somewhere between $5,000 and $6,000 a month to maintain a basic standard of living. Not a lavish one. Basic. Groceries, utilities, transportation, healthcare premiums, out-of-pocket medical, home maintenance, the occasional dinner out. So right there, in month 1 of retirement, this couple is already short $1,000 to $2,000. Every single month. That gap has to come from somewhere. And for most people, it comes from that $165,000 to $180,000 in liquid savings we talked about in the last section. Run the math, and it's not complicated, but it is uncomfortable. At a $1,500 monthly shortfall, that account is empty in 10 years. He's 75. At a $2,000 monthly shortfall, it's gone in about 7.5 years. He's 72. And we haven't touched inflation. We haven't touched a major home repair. We haven't touched a single hospitalization. That champagne moment was real. But the financial structure underneath it has a clock running. I've been close to conversations where someone pulls out their retirement budget for the first time and realizes the math only works if nothing goes wrong. No unexpected expenses, no rate increases, no health surprises, just a perfectly smooth 20-year glide. And somewhere in the room, everyone goes quiet because everyone knows life doesn't work that way. If nothing changes between now and age 77, this couple arrives there with the house still in their name and essentially no liquid cushion left. From that point forward, they are almost entirely dependent on Social Security and whatever government programs they qualify for. That's the fragility path, not a worst-case scenario. The default outcome if the plan stays exactly as it is. And here's the question I keep hearing from people in this exact situation. Wes, wait. We don't have a mortgage. How are we spending $5,000 or $6,000 a month? That's the right question. And it leads us directly to the trap most people never see coming. So where does the $5,000 or $6,000 a month go? A big piece of it goes to the house, not the mortgage. That's gone. But the house itself never stops billing you. Property taxes, homeowners insurance, maintenance and repairs, HOA fees in a lot of communities. These costs don't disappear when the mortgage does. And over the last several years, they haven't stayed flat either. The 2026 home insurance trend data puts the national average at $2,802 per year. That's the average. In climate-exposed states like Florida, that number has already crossed $5,735 per year, and it's still moving. Add a few $1,000s in annual property taxes, which in many counties have been reassessed upward as home values climbed, and you're looking at a quiet monthly drag of $600 to $1,000 every month, just to stay in a house you already own outright. Last month, a viewer from Florida sent me an email. He was close to shaking when he wrote it. His homeowner's insurance renewal had just come in at nearly $5,700. He said, "Wes, I feel like I'm paying rent on a house that has my name on the deed." That line stuck with me, because that's exactly what's happening. Paying off the mortgage doesn't make you the house's owner in the way most people imagine. It makes you the bank's former customer. You still owe the county. You still owe the insurance company. You still owe whoever shows up when the roof leaks or the HVAC system gives out after 15 years. The brutal trade-off here is this: eliminating your mortgage doesn't create positive cash flow. It transfers your creditor from the bank to the government and the insurance industry. Those new creditors don't offer refinancing. They don't negotiate, and their rates only move in one direction. This is what I mean by the paid-off home trap. It's not that owning your home free and clear is a bad thing. It's that the assumption of safety attached to it is outdated. The cost structure of home ownership has changed significantly, and the old equation, no mortgage equals financial breathing room, no longer holds the way it once did. A paid-off home in 2026 is still an asset, a real one. But it is also a monthly liability that doesn't show up as a line item until the bills arrive. When most financial advisors encounter this problem, their first instinct is to say, sell the big house, downsize, simplify. It sounds logical. It sounds clean. It isn't. Just downsize. It's the most common piece of retirement housing advice in America. Sell the big house, buy something smaller, pocket the difference, simplify your life. I have to be honest about something here. A few years ago, I repeated that advice myself. Fairly often. It made sense on the surface, and I passed it along without running the real numbers on what the transition actually costs in today's market. Looking at the inflation data and rental prices in 2026, I was wrong. Telling someone to sell their house right now and downsize is, in a lot of cases, pushing them from one financial problem into a worse one. So let's actually run it. You sell a $400,000 home. Before you see a dollar, you hand roughly 6% to the agents involved. That's $24,000 gone immediately. Then there are closing costs, moving expenses, storage if needed. You're easily down $28,000 to $32,000 before you've signed a lease or made an offer on anything new. Now you have two options. You rent. Average rent for a two-bedroom unit nationally is sitting around $2,000 a month, and in most metro areas it runs higher. Unlike a paid-off home, rent doesn't stay fixed. It adjusts. Landlords raise it. Your fixed income doesn't keep pace. Over 10 years, that monthly number almost certainly climbs, and there's no ceiling on how far it goes. Or you buy smaller. Except the housing market hasn't cooperated with the downsizing narrative. Smaller homes in desirable retirement areas are not significantly cheaper than they were 5 years ago. You'd be buying back into a high-priced market, taking on new property taxes assessed at current value, new insurance, and potentially a small mortgage if the math doesn't work clean. Either way, you traded a known cost for an unpredictable one. The hidden cost of staying is real. Property taxes and insurance are going up, and that's not nothing. But those are costs you can model, anticipate, and plan around. The cost of leaving introduces variables you cannot control: rental market swings, new tax assessments, the pure financial friction of the transaction itself. Renting long-term on a fixed income is one of the most financially exposed positions a retiree can be in. You are permanently subject to someone else's pricing decisions with no asset underneath you to offset it. So if staying slowly drains you and leaving trades one problem for a sharper one, what's the actual move? There are two levers worth pulling, and neither one requires you to put a for sale sign in the yard. You don't have to sell the house, but you do have to stop being passive about the cash flow problem. There are two levers that can meaningfully change the math without requiring you to uproot your life. The first one is Social Security timing. If you're still working, even part-time, and you haven't claimed yet, this is the highest leverage financial decision most people in their late 50s and early 60s are sitting on without realizing it. In 2026, the difference between claiming Social Security at 62 versus waiting until 70 is significant. At 62, the average monthly benefit sits around $2,969. At 70, that same worker collects around $5,181 a month. That's a gap of more than $2,200 every single month for the rest of your life. $2,200 a month. That number alone covers most of the property tax and insurance increases we talked about in the last two sections with room to spare. Every year you delay past 62 increases your benefit by a meaningful percentage. The break-even math generally favors waiting if you're in reasonable health and can bridge the gap with part-time income or existing savings. It's not the right call for everyone. But for people who claim early simply because they hit 62 and assumed that was the signal, it's worth running the actual numbers before you lock in a lower benefit permanently. The second lever is the reverse mortgage used as a buffer, not a bailout. Most people hear reverse mortgage and assume it means financial desperation. It doesn't have to. Here's the specific use case worth understanding. You set up a reverse mortgage line of credit on your home, and you don't touch it. You leave it sitting there as a financial reserve. Then, when the market drops and your portfolio is down 25%, instead of selling investments at a loss to cover your property tax bill or an unexpected medical expense, you draw from the line of credit temporarily. You protect the portfolio during the downturn. You let it recover. And you've used the house, the asset that was just sitting there, as a strategic cushion instead of a passive liability. The trade-off is real and worth naming directly. Using a reverse mortgage means you will likely leave less to your children. The equity gets drawn down over time. That's a legitimate consideration and a deeply personal one for a lot of families. But the other side of that trade-off is this: you stay in your home, you maintain your independence, and you don't end up financially dependent on your kids during the years when that dynamic is hardest on everyone. Personal finance has never been about perfect outcomes. It's always been about choosing which trade-offs you can live with. At least with these two levers, you're the one making that choice. Here's what I want you to take away from this. The paid-off home is not the problem. The assumption of automatic safety attached to it is. Net worth on paper and money you can actually live on are two different things. The gap between them is where most retirement plans quietly break down, not in a dramatic collapse, but in a slow, monthly erosion that's easy to miss until the cushion is already thin. You don't need to panic. You need to be precise. I don't have a crystal ball on where property taxes are heading next year, or what insurance markets look like after the next major storm season, or how Congress decides to adjust Social Security in the next decade. Anyone who tells you they know exactly how those pieces land is selling something. What I do know is this: the people who understand their actual cash flow today, not their net worth statement, not their home equity on paper, their real monthly numbers, those are the people who still have options when things shift. And things always shift. Awareness of the 80% hidden cost is not a reason to spiral. It's a reason to get specific. Run the numbers. Model the shortfall. Look at the two levers. And make decisions from clarity instead of from assumptions that made sense in a different economic era. What's the heaviest financial pressure you're feeling right now? Property taxes, insurance costs, or just the overall cost of staying put? Leave it in the comments. I read them, and the most common answers shape what we cover next on this channel. And if this kind of analysis is useful to you, subscribe. That's what Wes Investor is built for: the real math behind retirement decisions without the noise.